we don't waste any more time. We bring in Tony Haynes, Wolfpack Radio Network sideline analyst, who I saw the release on Friday, sir, and I don't know, I felt sad and happy at the same time as you are entering what you have announced would be your final season on the sidelines for NC State football. I assume you're ditching basketball too. How you doing?
I'm doing great, but, this show today was bursting with energy until you chose to play one of my favorite songs, which happens to be a pretty poignant, sad song. But I appreciate you pulling that one out. Perhaps it's appropriate for the occasion, right?
Well, look, it should be an exciting football season. Before I get to the,
right.
to the team and the game against East Carolina, just because, I'm just going to throw some praise at you. I think what you do, we have sideline reporters all over the place in all sports. You are a sideline analyst, and I think it's been the best part of any radio broadcast, pro or college, that I have ever listened to. So, and I think part of that, a huge part of it, is because you're really good at it. And now, so you guys have two analysts, but your perspective on the field is just, it's next level. So I missed that already.
Well, I appreciate that. I think I can see things on the field that they can't see in the booth. Likewise, they can see some things up there that I don't always I'm not able to pick out when you're on the sidelines. But I think it's been a good combination. When I first started at Duke in 1987, that was my first opportunity. They had a first-year coach there by the name of Steve Spurrier. What a way to break in. And, I was more like a sideline reporter. I was young then. I didn't know as many things as I know now, but it was more, reporting on injuries and that sort of thing. So I had not moved into that kind of sideline analyst realm yet, but it took a lot of years of trying to learn as much about football as I possibly could. And, one of the things that makes this career rewarding is that our coaches, both at Duke and now at NC State for 26 years, they've given me a lot of access. And with that access, including practice and those sorts of things, if you're willing to learn more and you run around with your eyes open and you ask the right questions, you can learn. And hopefully that's kind of paid off for me over the years.
Tony Haynes is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. All right, now let's get to this team. What is the significance in starting this season against the team that you ended last season against?
That's a great question, because when I think of East Carolina, and I go back to when I was a teenager, I'd literally, back in 1974, 75, I'd be sitting on the old grassy hill when NC State would play East Carolina, and Pat Dye was the coach at ECU back then. And they were really good. They ran the wishbone. But ECU has always played with a chip on its shoulder, and not just against NC State, against North Carolina. They just kind of carry that chip on their shoulder over the years, and it's worked for them. It's been very effective. They always play like they've got something to prove. And you look at all the quote-unquote upset wins that they posted over the years, it shows up. When they're good enough, they're a threat to beat just about anybody. So, yeah, it is the old proverbial they play with a chip on their shoulder. One thing that Coach Doeren said on Friday night, NC State is going to have a chip on its shoulder, not only for this game, but for this season. And I think part of that chip comes from that very disappointing loss to ECU in the Military Bowl and the way it ended. Coach Doeren has said it many times how embarrassed he was by the behavior of some of his players after the game was over. I think it still bugs him. I remember in the post game interview after the Military Bowl, he was really upset. He was mad, and he was mad at his guys for the way they handled that situation. So, they've been stewing on that for months and months and months. So I think you're going to have two teams now that open up on Carter Finley Stadium. Both of them feel like they got something to prove.
Tony Haynes is joining us here in the Adam Gold Show. I mentioned this earlier, and I'm not sure enough has been made about it, because almost every other coach would have softened the blow, would have said things like, well, yeah, there were certain things that were said, but he wanted none of that. I mean, he took he said we were responsible for that behavior. Tony Haynes is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. All right, I want to get to the quarterback because over the last couple of seasons, State's brought in a quarterback through the transfer portal to varying levels of success or non-success. But this year, they start with their own. How much of a factor is it that whether C.J. Bailey is great or not, and I think he will be very good and better than last year, but how much of a factor is it that he's been here a year? They know who C.J. Bailey is.
Well, I think it's huge. And in this era of transfer portal, when players as good as C.J. Bailey actually stay for 2 years, he's becoming a rare commodity at a specialized position. And you look at his numbers from last year, the only two quarterbacks I can think of that posted numbers that were similar or just a little bit better were Phillip Rivers and Russell Wilson as a rookie, as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
So, you put your name on that list with a couple of guys like that. That means you had a really good freshman year. And, this was thrown at him unexpectedly because they had a veteran quarterback that they thought would be one of the best in the ACC. He gets knocked out early in the season. And then they hand C.J. Bailey the ball and say, all right, young man, it's all yours. And we're going through the meat of the ACC schedule. And he succeeded. I think he actually exceeded anybody's reasonable expectations with the way he played. And he got better and better, and they learned how to use his strengths to their advantage. And they obviously had some good skilled people. I thought, as a passer, a freshman just throwing the football with his ability to put the ball in tight windows and making good decisions, he was exceptional. But now he gets to the second year, and he gets in his second year working with Kurt Roper, which I think is very important. And Coach Roper now goes from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator. So there's a bond and a trust that's already built up between Coach Roper and C.J. Bailey. And I'm really eager to see what he can do. I think he has a chance to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
Where is the biggest area of improvement he can make?
I just think overall consistency.
Okay.
And again, freshmen at any position, but particularly at that spot, they're going to have their share of ups and downs. But he was impressive the way he composed himself. The players automatically got behind him. Every one of them, 2 games into his freshman season, they were talking about what a great leader and communicator he was, how enthusiastic he is. He does bring a great deal of enthusiasm and love for the game. I think the word consistency, it would be there, and you kind of expect to see that between the freshman and sophomore season.
I think Dave Doeren talked about the offense needing to be better early in games. If you look at overall the package offensively, overall the numbers weren't bad, but sometimes those starts were really bad, and my guess is that C.J. Bailey wants to be better earlier in games, so you're not playing catch-up to avoid those mistakes in the first and second quarters.
Absolutely, and that stings when you look back on what was a 6-7 season, and they lost 4 one-possession games. So it's tough when you get off to a rough start and you're fighting uphill for the entirety of 4 quarters. Now, to their credit, they managed to get back in most of those games and have a chance. I mean, you think about late in the season, they had a great comeback at Georgia Tech, but then the defense couldn't stop the Yellow Jackets in the last minute. They went down and they scored. Even the Duke game, which I think ended up being a 10-point game, it was essentially a one-possession game because I think Duke took advantage of a turnover and scored late. So in my mind, they had 5 one-possession losses last year. And it just shows you that not all of the important possessions are in the fourth quarter.
Right.
Don't take for granted what's happening in the first quarter, right?
Right.
And if you get off to a good start, it kind of sets a tone for the game.
Yeah, it really can change the game. Whether it's real or imagined, like you've seen it all the time. I'm not accusing anybody of doing this. You'll fall behind early, and all of a sudden, oh man, you just got to throw the ball. And you don't, right? There's plenty of time. There's 15 possessions in most college football games, maybe more. I mean, heck, could be each team could end up having 12 possessions in a college football game or more. So you can still do what you do, but sometimes it is imagined that you're too far behind. You abandon all things. Talk to me, Tony, about the fact that Tony Gibson is now at Marshall and how NC State moves on from really one of the best defensive eras that we have seen at NC State.
Yeah, and as a hitchhiking on your point you just made, since they changed the clock rules a few years ago, generally speaking, you do have fewer possessions and fewer offensive plays in a game, which makes it more difficult to come back because the games are a little bit shorter because of the way the clock runs continuously. It doesn't stop on every time the ball goes out of bounds. It stops briefly, but then they crank that thing back up. It's almost more like the NFL now. Yes, you're right. NC State under Tony Gibson, for the most part, traditionally had one of the best, most disruptive defenses in the ACC. And to me, it starts at the linebacker position. There was a time when Isaiah Moore, Drake Thomas, and Peyton Wilson were playing together. Okay, that was as good a group as we've seen here probably since. You have to go back 15 years or so to find a group that was that talented and that good. And all three of those guys played in the NFL. Isaiah briefly because of injuries, but so they were very dynamic personnel-wise. I thought their personnel slipped a little bit, especially at that position. And then Caden Fordham injures himself. He was the leader of the defense. Yeah. So that hurt them, but they got to get back. We'll be interested to see how this pans out with DJ Elliott coming in, because they weren't that powerful, dynamic defensive team last year. They gave up 30 points per game, almost 400 yards per game. Opposing teams rushed for an average of 4.8 yards per rush. You don't want to be in that territory as a defense. And then on top of that, they gave up a bevy of explosive plays. So I think one thing Coach Doeren did when he went out, he found DJ Elliott, who's known for years. Elliott, of course, worked for the Eagles a couple of years ago, and it made an impact on Coach Doeren when he watched his beloved Chiefs lose to the Eagles in the Super Bowl, and the way that the Eagles' defensive front just dominated that game. Now, NC State's talent on the defensive line it's not going to look like the Philadelphia Eagles, but the point behind what I'm saying, and he mentioned this. He wants to get back to making tackles in the backfield. He wants more disruption like they had for the most part under Tony Gibson. He wants plays that go negative. He wants more quarterback sacks. He wants more quarterback pressures. So we'll maybe see on Thursday night where this defense might be headed in that first game against East Carolina.
All right, Will Fordham, who, by the way, will wear number 1, which is a great honor for him. I saw that. Will it be him or somebody else on that maybe first or second line of defense that is that dynamic playmaker that, I'm not saying makes people remember Bradley Chubb or, Mario Williams or Manny Lawson or players like that, but who will be that catalyst that leads to those TFLs that NC State needs? And then we will let Tony Haynes go.
Well, I think Brandon Cleveland is due a big year. His career path at defensive tackle is almost paralleled that of what we saw at B.J. Hill when Coach Doeren first got here. B.J. Hill started as a freshman because he had to.
Right.
They just didn't have a lot of depth on the defensive line, but it really worked out for B.J. Hill. He became an outstanding college defensive lineman and is enjoying a long, fruitful career in the NFL. But B.J. Hill had to get knocked around his freshman year because a lot of times you don't want your your starting defensive tackle being a freshman. But he benefited from it. And Brandon Cleveland kind of ran into the same thing a couple of years ago. And now I think they expect him in his third year to blossom as maybe one of the better, more dominant defensive tackles on the inside. And I think Sean Brown, too. I think Sean Brown, he's a converted safety. he was one of NC's. He is a disruptor.
Right.
And you got a guy that came in with the speed of a safety, add a few pounds, and now he's playing linebacker. He made some plays in the backfield last year in his first year as a linebacker. You would expect him to continue to evolve.
All right, we're going to let you go there. I know we'll talk again between now and the end of the season, so we'll get nostalgic and maybe even a little romantic about the sport coming up later on in the year. Have fun on Thursday night, which should be an absolute treat to open up the season against the Pirates at Carter Finley Stadium Thursday night. Appreciate your time, Tony Haynes.
Yeah, and the most important thing is I'll be playing from the senior tees in about 3 months.
Which you don't even need.
But I can justify it when I'm retired.
Gotcha.
And I got a Medicare card in my pocket as well.
Oh, man, you're the best. Thank you very much, Tony. I appreciate your time.
See you, Adam. Thank you.
You got it. Tony Haynes here on the Adam Gold Show.